Today we're talking Labour and Keir Starmer. In essence, is Sir Keir Starmer doomed if he loses the Batley and Spen by-election? By the time you're watching this, you may know the results, so you get to find out whether we were right or not in our assumptions. I'm Iain Martin, editor of Reaction. If you're not a subscriber to Reaction, it's very simple. Go to the button below and hit subscribe. If you're not a subscriber to Reaction on our website and you want my weekly newsletter and all the brilliant journalism by Maggie Pagano, who joined me today, and the rest of the team, then go to the website, details in the bio, and you can get a free trial now, a 30-day free trial. Test out Reaction before hopefully becoming a subscriber and getting all the great journalism that the team produce. So Maggie, we're talking about Keir Starmer, Labour, Batley and Spen on Thursday happening. It looks at the moment as though he's going to lose. Is that a fair assumption? Most of the polling suggests that, and the Tories look pretty confident.
Yeah, it does rather look that. It's a very fragmented vote, 16 candidates. And of course, we've got George Galloway, who is dividing the Labour vote. It was only a 3,500 majority last time. And It doesn't look as though the Labour Party has come out really sun shining on this. Hasn't been a very strong campaign, very divisive, very nasty. I mean, Iain, as you know, I've not had great faith in Keir Starmer, sadly, from the beginning. But you tell me what you think, because you're a great follower of the Labour Party, and thought that he was sort of okay, didn't you, to start with?
Follow is probably the wrong word.
I know, okay, not
for a long time.
Follow it with it, the party.
I've followed the meanderings of the Labour Party with great interest as a journalist. But no, I think you're right. I do have a weird, actually, I admit it, as a journalist, I have a kind of residual affection for it. I like the fact that the Labour Party is or has been a unionist party, and it's a great British institution. We have effectively two-party politics in Britain. It's different, of course, in Scotland. And if you have a two-party voting system or a 2.5-party voting system, then you need, and you don't want the government to be too arrogant and assume that power goes on forever, then you need a strong opposition and a strong alternative potential government. And that is not where the Labour Party is at the moment. I mean, the question on Batley and Spen, as you said, looks from a distance like a classic, absolutely horrible British by-election. Occasionally you get them. Sometimes by-elections are a great fun story and they're thrilling to watch. This one just looks, for all the reasons you described, heartily unpleasant. And it looks, unless there's some sort of shock in the aftermath of the difficulties that Johnson and the Tories got into on Matt Hancock, unless some of that is feeding through in a spirit of, I don't know, one rule for them and one rule for the ruling class and one rule for the voters, that could shift things a bit. But Labour's going to have to be very lucky to win. The question then is, what happens to Starmer? Does Starmer survive this defeat, or does he actually decide that enough is enough? And I think he's now getting into that zone, and there's a zone where leaders of the opposition, it's a tough gig, terrible job actually being leader of the opposition, a pretty thankless task. He's into that zone where it's starting to look as though the view of him as, I hesitate to use the word loser, but someone who's not going to make it, becomes fixed in the public mind. And once that happens, as William Hague discovered much earlier on in his leadership, it's almost impossible to shift that view. Yeah,
you almost become a lame duck before you starting the fight. You need somebody who has he does have a good story to tell, but you need somebody with some excitement. You don't, governments, there's no sort of fizz there, is there? And what the interesting question is, where will the challenge come from? The challenge presumably from the hard left, and yet what people are saying is that the next leader would be somebody like Andy Burnham, Yvette Cooper, somebody from the centre who could hopefully bring the party with them. I don't know. Certainly Andy Burnham has that fizz, whether you like it or not. he is quite a, you'd probably want to be in the room with him. He'd be quite an exciting person to talk to be with. Whereas Keir Starmer doesn't have that, does he?
Quite a lot of voters, how shall I phrase this politely, Southern voters, I think would really dislike Burnham quite quickly. I mean, he's put himself out there today ahead of the by-election. Very interesting and incredibly ambitious, but he's put himself out there with an interview advertising that he's at some point prepared to go back. So he's clearly angling for it. He is an interesting politician.
And he took on Sturgeon.
His critics, I mean, some of his former colleagues in the Labour Party in the Blair Brown era, my goodness, the stories they tell against Andy Burnham, always painting him as opportunistic, of course all politicians have to be opportunistic to an extent, but painting him as a politician, I merely report this, as a politician who signed up to the Blair project because it was convenient, and then the Brown project because it was convenient, and actually he's a shapeshifter. But you could have said that, I suppose, about Harold Wilson or all manner of other people who have been successful in politics. I do raise the question about whether England will vote for a Liverpudlian politician. I think that's an open question. He's not an MP. It could be just as it could be with Sadiq Khan. It's plausible to get them into Parliament relatively quickly on by-elections, but it's not straightforward, and that can go wrong. Interestingly, there's a poll out conducted by YouGov, and this is what starts to make me wonder whether Starmer might just think enough is enough. Why prolong it? In that, I think 7 out of 10 Labour members, and it's a poll of almost 1,000 Labour members by YouGov, say that Andy Burnham would be a better Labour leader, and someone there posing that question has designed that question with a brilliant eye for a news story. 4 in 10 say that he should stand down if he loses the Batley and Spen election on Thursday, and 2/3 of Labour members in the poll say, and this I think is so revealing, say that Labour will lose the next election, which, I mean, it's only 2021 now. There is quite a long way to go to the election, but that just gives you a glimpse into the mentality of the Labour movement and how defeated it feels at the moment up against Boris Johnson. In terms of people who are in Parliament, and there's no clear winner, but 35% would go in a snap leadership contest for Yvette Cooper. I think Yvette Cooper is a really interesting politician. I was a critic of Yvette Cooper during the Brown years, but I think she's developed in a really interesting way as a politician. She of course has a very small majority, so that sometimes when choosing a leader, that's a factor, just in case they would then lose their seat in the subsequent general election. Lisa Nandy second, Rayner down on 12%, and Richard Bergen, and I would love to meet some of the 6% of Labour Party members who think that Richard Bergen, the Corbynite, should be the next leader of the Labour Party. All in all, it's not a happy situation for the Labour Party, and I would argue not a healthy situation for the country either, in that we don't have
effective opposition.
Precisely.
But, in a sense, Iain, let's go back to Batley and some of the issues. I've heard, and both parties are guilty of this, but I haven't heard either Kim Leadbeater or Ryan Shorthouse, isn't it, the Conservative, defend or even speak openly and honestly about the teacher who is still in hiding. We have somebody in Britain who taught at a British school in hiding, fearing for his life. I mean, it is the most staggering situation, and neither candidate has really addressed it. Neither party has addressed it. Instead, they're arguing about, Kashmir and Palestine, and yet, it is mad. They talk about burying their heads. And the other interesting angle that I picked up from reading some of the more local stories is that a lot of the former Labour supporters are saying that it's not that they don't particularly like the Labour candidate, but they've seen what has happened in seats that have swung, red wall seats that have swung to the Tories. So Hartlepool, Tyneside, Teesside, sorry, where the mayor is a Conservative, where they have actually, they know that the Tories have been in power for 10 years, but they have brought in new money, or Andy Street in Birmingham. So they're saying, well, actually, let's think a bit about us directly. If we had a Conservative here, they've got to start investing more. I'm not saying they would, but it is certainly, you know.
Do you not find the pork barrel nature of contemporary politics really worrying?
Yes, it is, because it shouldn't.
This idea that if you vote for the government, they will, in ways which, of course, sorry, the government deny this, but that if you do that, that it will then, the local area will tap into it now. But it's always happened in politics to an extent, but it's now actually quite blatant. It's a campaigning, it's a campaigning technique.
I know. No, it is.
Yeah,
it is. But it's perhaps also a judgment on how many years of Labour rule, Labour Council. You know, why haven't they been fighting? Why they haven't been working with businesses to attract more inward investment? You know.
Yeah.
You have to see both sides, I think, to that one.
I think it's going to raise, if he does lose. I mean, if he wins, it's a fantastic story and interesting in a whole other set of ways. But if he loses, it's on the back of Hartlepool, losing their deposit in Chesham and Amersham recently, and just this general sense that he is not cutting through because he has a lawyerly demeanor. He's the prosecutor, but that he's not actually particularly political. I mean, this will be
very good point.
This is going to be a big test this weekend if he loses, because in the aftermath of the elections in May, remember how he fluffed his attack on Rayner, where he wanted to demote Angela Rayner, and then moved just when it gave her the opportunity to fight back, and ruined a weekend where on the Saturday he had positive news to tell about some advances that Labour had made in certain parts of England and mayoralties.
Well, losing Tracy, who's going to become mayor. I mean, there was masses of
Tracy Brabham, So it's a test. Everyone is going to in politics land and media land is going to be focused on Starmer in the hours and days afterwards. There will be a torrent of Labour voices. The far left will be gleeful and demanding the return of Corbyn, and all manner of craziness will be going on, and all sorts of people you won't expect will pop up giving anguished reports on the near death of the Labour Party. That's a test for him. How does he get from the beginning of Friday through to the end of the weekend and still be leader of the Labour Party without his reputation completely shredded? But if you're watching this, the voters haven't voted in person. Of course, they've started voting in terms of postal votes, but voting is on Thursday, and we'll be back with more analysis on Labour and much more, I'm sure, in the aftermath of the by-election of Batley and Spen. If you're not a subscriber to Reaction and you'd like to see more of these videos, please hit subscribe in the button underneath this video and become a subscriber to Reaction, to our website. Get all of the brilliant journalism produced by the team, and you can get a 30-day free trial and try us before you buy and become a subscriber, hopefully. But until next time, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.